Hey everybody, my name's Jason, and today I'm here to talk about records and music. And specifically, I want to touch on a band that came out of my hometown, and they were formed in 1990, and they are often considered kind of a one-hit wonder on the national stage, but they eventually would spawn probably one of the more popular bands of the kind of indie world of the early 2000s. But we're talking about Tripping Daisy. And the band that they've sort of spun off is, well, you can thank them for two bands, sort of. The core members of this band that survived from Tripping Daisy, we'll talk about that later, were that went on to form Polyphonic Spree. One notable member of the Polyphonic Spree at one point was St. Vincent. Now, the Dallas music scene has a long and interesting history of successes and kind of missed opportunities, I would say. And some of those bands, like the Toadies, would sort of go through the process of like floundering and reforming and coming back to thrive. But the kind of heyday of the 90s was this time when the music industry, still being very profitable, was a time where you could really experiment and be interesting. And what's made Tripping Daisy stand apart is the fact that they, or at least from their contemporaries in like the Dallas music scene at the time, like specifically Deep Ellum, is that they had more of a pop sensibility about them. Now their biggest hit came on their album I'm Elastic Firecracker with the song I Got a Girl, which is featured on Beavis and Butthead. And that's the one record I have theirs I don't have. In recent years, Good Records in Dallas, Texas has been reissuing their classic records. The band did reform sort of in like 2017, even though technically speaking they were still together. Now the two core members have unfortunately since passed, or at least from the original lineup. You had Wes Bergen, who unfortunately passed away from a drug overdose in 1999, and at the time that sort of effectively signaled the end of the band, though with the release of Jesus Hits Like an Atom Bomb, which is arguably their best record, the sort of a case of the record label not really grasping like the greatness of the record at the time, maybe, and I think that they were dropped from their label after this was made. Unfortunately, the music business is what it is, but this album is phenomenal. It's definitely the band in their kind of rawer state. I'll pull out their record just because some beautiful artwork in here, and you have this sort of full. This is TIm Delauter, their singer, who owns Good Records as well. I think he co-owns a cocktail lounge in East Dallas with his former partner, and also a couple of kind of record-themed bars in Dallas. I think on the record, or off the record. Memory's a little fuzzy on that. So, he's definitely gone on to do some things. Good Records is probably his most successful venture. But through that, we've gotten these beautiful reissued vinyl records. I don't know what the run is like for these, so if you're interested in buying these, I would call Good Records and try to get a copy. So, the songs of this record, like My Umbrella is a really popular one, great tune. One of the 1 through 4, Lost and Found, Change of Mind, like phenomenal run of the first run of songs. As I said, the songwriting is a little more on the raw side, and you kind of hear hints of grunge-ish influence, though I would never call them a grunge band. They're more of a neo-psychedelic, like, pop rock band. Though I think the difference between them and, like, Polyphonic Spree, while I like Polyphonic Spree a lot, is that the re-listenability of, like, these records is pretty high, whereas, like, Polyphonic Spree is more of a live experience, something you go to see. Like, I went to see their Christmas show last year. Phenomenal experience. If you ever get a chance, it happens in Dallas. Most years, I mean, I think there was a gap of time where they didn't do them, but they used to happen at the Lakewood Theater. And more recently, they've been going on at the Majestic Theater. I believe this year it was like a 2-night run of shows. But yeah, Bill, really solid record, but definitely more on the, like, musically, I don't want to say immature side, but, like, you see clear growth on their later records. Arguably, like, Elastic Firecracker was their biggest hit. I don't have that record, but while simultaneously has their biggest hit, it also has some of their most inaccessible and denser material. In terms of just, like, sonic, like, texture, and they would really lean more into their pop side on this record, though. This is really love this record. Like Sonic Bloom, surprised that was never a bigger hit. But I mean, everything from, like, Field Day Jitters, Way to Lightyear, to Human Contact, About the Movies is a wonderful song. And yeah, the fact that this is not a bigger record, I think it boils down to maybe just business related issues and just a lack of promotion. But my God, it is a good record. And this one actually has a clear vinyl. They've pressed, like, multiple versions of these records. So this one is their self-titled record, and their final one before Wes passed away. Probably the one that's taken me the most by surprise. They definitely take a lot of risks on this, but it's also that they're more, like, calm and more psychedelic and just, like, beautiful sounding music. And I think you can kind of see the hints of the direction that you would get with, like, Polyphonic Spree on this record. And it's weird because, like, there aren't necessarily, aside from Soothing Jubilee, which is probably one of my favorite songs by them. Interesting, 1 through 4, I guess they re-recorded that. So, yeah, aside from that, they, like, the last 4 runs of songs, like, is the sort of inverse of the first 4 songs of Bill. It's sort of it gets into their more weirdly psychedelic and just experimental music. So I think at this point the band wasn't quite as they didn't quite have the profile they did before, but they probably were just like, well, we're just going to make the music we want to make. I think Tim would have to tell me more about that. I don't know the actual story. I did meet Tim at a private show at Good Records a few years ago. Seemed like a nice guy, a little bit on the quiet side, but and I think I indirectly found that one of his kids went to the same college that I went to, SCAD, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of nice to hear that there's, like, creative, like, creativity, like, continuing that line, their family. So yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about some other bands that have come out of Dallas. One of my favorite reissues that I got a few years ago is from the band Dusu. How would I describe this band? It's sort of like a mix between, like, if Rush was a punk band. Now this is that sounds a little more evident in their final record. This is more of like a like, you hear that Rush influence, but it's more of like a proto metal, like, prog album. And but yeah, this one sounds especially phenomenal. Like, I got into a discussion with a friend of mine about the sort of validity of, like, fidelity and on vinyl, and it really can, to my own ambition, it can be really hit or miss depending on the record. But like these new reissues, especially with Reissues and these Tripping Daisy albums, like sound phenomenal, and I get more detail out of it. And the warmth thing, I suppose, is subjective depending on the quality of the speakers you're working with. But I would argue that like I get so much more out of hearing these that I did like when I first heard them in my like late teens and early 20s on CD. Like the difference is noticeable, and sometimes you hear that with like older records that aren't 180 gram or whatever. It really just depends. Now, kind of a case study of another band, as I mentioned before, Toadies. This is an interesting record, and I'll get more into them in another video at some point. But this record is another example of a missed opportunity with a band that they did re-record this, but they think this is originally the follow-up to Rubberneck, which is to this day, their most popular record, and the one that they kind of revisit a lot. And if you hear the difference on this record, like they clearly weren't trying to repeat themselves. A lot of the material from those early sessions, the old demos were floating around for a long time, you can probably still find them somewhere. But the song structures are not that different. The audio quality in this re-recorded version, which was in 2010, is definitely a better quality. It doesn't have all these same members. Lisa Umberger specifically, who was their bass player, and she went through a bout of cancer, I believe, but she was fortunately able to recover from, to my understanding. So like the band, even though she did split up with the band, they went back and showed support for her in that time, which is great to see. But there was a really big gap between their first record and Hell Below Stars Above. This is supposed to be the in-between period. Now, if you do listen to like Rubberneck, this, then Hell Below Stars Above, you do start to see the progression a little bit. But like the jump between Rubberneck and Hell Below Stars Above is so jarring, because Hell Below sounds more like a pop punk record, and Toadies need to reissue that. So, with that in mind, it was really cool to see that they came back and like re-recorded this, but like the sound on this record is a little harsher, or just the band in general, though I'd say they get into the most experimentation on that record than they do with any of their records, which also might explain why they didn't release it when they did, and that sort of gap in tension would lead to the band breaking up for a number of years until they got back together. But with Tripping Daisy and Polyphonic Spree, there is a really big difference. But like much like a kind of the origin story of like a band like Pearl Jam, I wouldn't necessarily exactly equate the stories completely the same, but you have the loss of a band member and the reaction to that, or maybe like Deftones with Diamond Eyes, like the reaction was to come back and do something positive because it was a need to heal and reconcile that unfortunate loss. So I do really like Polyphonic Spree. I love seeing them on some live. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things where like the experience of listening to a record is a bit different, but also the way that like Polyphonic Spree's music is structured on their records versus their live shows kind of portrays something a little different. There's sort of this more sporadic, spread out sort of structure to their music, and it's more of a meditation and a stream of consciousness structure, whereas like and that there's the structure is based on sort of like choral arrangements, and like they're creating this sort of like secular church like atmosphere. Though the Christmas shows are, they're Christmas shows, but you don't necessarily get any like big religious statements from it. It's just simply a celebration of the season. And but they're a lot of fun, and I like they kind of take some ideas from like the stage display of like the Flaming Lips. Not exactly the same extreme. Like Tim isn't jumping around in a giant bubble, but you have balloons and you have like a 20+ piece band. You have like 6 backup singers, whereas like Trippin' Daisy is just like a few guys and a pretty standard pop rock band. But you do see a lot of creativity, and I would say the structure is a little more tight in Trippin' Daisy, and the songs are a little more concise, even as you get into their later, weirder material. But yeah, Tripping Daisy is a lot of fun. If you want to check out these, I'll link the URL to Good Records in this video description. And behind me is my artwork. And if you want to check out more of that, go to jason-stallings.com. And I'll see you soon.